Furina. I think this character has managed to win the hearts of many Genshin players from her release. Not just from her Archon story, but also just how strong meta-wise she is. And I think it's only appropriate for us to kind of reflect back on what makes this character just so strong, so meta-defining, and how she kind of just changes unit evaluation and the Genshin meta overall forever. Because this may be the first singular character that Hoyoverse has released that I think drastically changes the game. I don't think a single unit released changes the game as much as Furina does with her release. So the first thing I want to do with this post-release reflection is to compare what I had with my first impressions on Furina, which I did post a video on, which kind of got taken down, but it just came back up recently, so you can watch that if you want. But I just want to compare my first impressions with what I think everyone knows about Furina's kit now. The first thing we can go over is her skill. I kind of refer to it as a Hydro official, Hydro Oz, and I think it's pretty much still true. Furina's skill just does so much damage. I think it is cool that there are both Numa and Usia forms, but I know from the original video people were talking about how she might replace Kokomi as a healer, but I think what many people fail to realize is that her Numa form that heals, although it does heal a good amount, it doesn't do anything else other than heal. It doesn't provide any hydro application, it doesn't do damage. So realistically, from what we know now, you never use this Numa form unless you're like walking in the overworld exploring, or you have some downtime in the abyss and want to heal up your characters while you're farming for energy. Other than that, you're like 99.9% on that Usia form because it just does so much damage, and that's where her hydro application is, which is really important. As for her ult, I think I was pretty accurate on the strength of her ult, although I wasn't completely sure how many fanfare stacks you could get and how much the buff actually does for your team. I think after a while and just playing her myself, we realized that it is a great damage buff. Like, on top of doing damage for her skill, the fact that she's able to provide a team-wide damage buff is very good. And of course, I mentioned that you won't get this maximum fanfare stacks because you need to stack it up through HP consumption or healing, and the fact that because her skill consumes HP, you're going to need to run a healer on your teams. And both of those things are definitely true. That is 100% the flaw of Furina, but you can definitely just work around it and you'll get great benefits out of it. As for her talents, I did kind of gloss over them in my first impressions, and yeah, well, this one, more damage with her skill, with HP consumption. I think I heavily underrated this passive, where if you over heal from sources of healing that's not Furina, you get a free team-wide heal. I kind of just brushed this off saying like, oh, that's cool and all, but I think this passive is actually really important. Not so much so that you need to force the overheal, but the fact that you just get free healing from overhealing, and overhealing is not too uncommon. It just helps with, number one, team survivability, and two, maintaining fanfare stacks. For constellations, I still don't have much to say about it because I don't get constellations myself, but C1 and the new C2 compared to what I saw before are great for just maximizing fanfare stacks and front loading the stacks that you get when you instantly press ult, so it just helps her with her buff. I wouldn't say it's that game breaking, but it makes her significantly stronger. If you get to C4 is definitely cool. You can squeak out some more damage without relying to build on energy recharge. And C6, which may or may not have been a different constellation beforehand, but it's now her C6. I definitely corrected myself from my first impressions with that second video, and I think it still stands. If you are a mega whale and you have this, you get the privilege of having Furina on field doing massive damage like you have Yolan C6, and you can forego a healer on your team, which just increases your team DPS. But I guess if you have C6 Furina, you don't really need to worry about team DPS, do you? As for gear, artifact set, I think I was right on the money. I don't think you should go any other set except this golden troop set. All of her damage is under elemental skill, and this just gives so much elemental skill damage bonus. There's absolutely no reason to go another set unless you want to meme around, maximize with C6, or you just don't have a good 4 set piece. But you definitely want to have a 4 set in the endgame build. And as for weapons, since I am a day 1 player, this is just perfect for a Festering Desire, just everything that you could ask for. It's really good for just a freely accessible weapon, but you know, if you don't, you can just run Favonius, that's fine. I don't have many weapons on my account, but you could go the new Fishing Pipe, that's also good if you don't have Festering Desire and you're looking for a free-to-play weapon. 5-star weapons, I think I was okay in answering your questions. Her signature is fine, but you need ER timepiece. Key is, I think, better than I expected, even though I thought it was good. If your team has use for that Ian buff, it's really good, and it gives a lot of HP percent. As for other 5-star weapons, Jade Cutter, I'm still kind of iffy on it. I think you might as well run like Favonius Sword. And for Freedom Sworn, I think some people may have asked, just run that on Kazuha. I don't think you need to run that on Furina. So yeah, ultimately these are my final stats that I have right now. She's really strong. But why exactly is she so strong? We already have so many other Hydro characters that kind of compete in a role, Yelan, Xingqiu most specifically. And I think the best way to visualize the answer to this question is to see what role she fulfills in a team and how she slots in within many different teams. So what is her team role? Well, as a Hydro character that primarily deals damage off field, she heavily competes with the Hydro Sub-DPS characters like Xingqiu and Yelan, and I've seen and heard the topic of comparing all of these three many times. I'll post one video that I saw from a small and relatively new content creator, but generally Xingqiu would be your most defensive option, Yelan will be a more offensive option than Xingqiu, and Furina will be the highest damage option from all three of them. Along with being just a great sub-DPS from her E skill, off-field Hydro damage and Hydro application, her ult is able to grant a massive team damage bonus buff for your whole team. So the fact that she's able to combine both a sub-DPS character and a buff character into one is, I think, pretty much the main reason why she's a really strong character. So in a sense, she's not only a Hydro official that does great sub DPS damage, but she's also a great buffer as well. So in a way, she's also like Kazuha. And I think a comparison between Furina's damage bonus when she ults and Kazuha's damage bonus when he swirls kind of shows how similar Furina can be in terms of supportive capability with Kazuha. So if we assume Furina has max stacks on her fanfare, she gives 75 damage bonus for her team, which is a lot, but of course this is not realistic, so I'm going to assume 150 stacks, and if we calculate for 150 stacks at talent level 10, we see that she gives 37.5% damage bonus. On the other hand, for Kazuha, if we assume around 800 EM, when he swirls an element, he gives 32% damage bonus when he swirls an element. Now of course I do this calculation comparison not to just show, haha, oh, Furina has a bigger number. Obviously the damage buff that they give is harder to calculate because Kazuha also has 40% resistance shred from Viridescent Venerer, and Kazuha also has the grouping potential and does a good amount of damage himself. But the reason I do this calc is just to show the actual damage percent number that Furina gives. Because even calculating at half stacks, it's already a similar damage bonus value to Kazuha. And we all know how strong Kazuha is in a team. And this, I believe, is even lowballing it. 150, I think in a proper team setup, you'll definitely reach higher stacks. Although remember, the damage bonus does ramp up, so you get less of it when you first start ulting. With the proper team comp and healer, I do believe that you'll be able to reach high stacks quickly, so the average can definitely be higher, which means just more damage bonus for your team. And also, you can even argue that Furina's damage bonus that she gives is easier to obtain than Kazuha. As an Archon, Furina has easy uptime with her E, and with enough energy recharge, which is why you should build energy recharge, her ult should be a full uptime as well. As with Kazuha, you kind of need to play around swirling the actual element that you want, which becomes more complicated with double swirl setups, and Viridescent Venerer doesn't last forever. Of course, let's be honest, it isn't that hard, not that much of a difficulty difference, but I'm just, I think it's just a little bit more hoops that you have to go through for Kazuha's damage bonus. But the main thing I'm trying to show here is not, oh, Furina is better than Kazuha, or, oh, this buff is better than this buff. The main thing I'm trying to show is that they serve similar roles in a team in terms of offensive support capability. And I think the best way to actually show this is to just look at some team comp setup examples. So the first two setups I wanted to show are these two setups. We can see Alhaitham Nahida Kuki and Yai Nahida Kuki, and they're set up very similarly for a reason. You can see that they're kind of the same team in the sense where we have the leftmost slot is the main DPS Alhaitham and Yai, which are paired with two, you could say, supports, Nahida and Kuki. Nahida being a sub-DPS and a buffer. Coincidence. I wonder why she's so strong. Maybe it's because she's a buffer and a sub-DPS like Furina. And Kuki, which is our main healer slot. And both these teams kind of want a last offensive support. So if we just go to the Yai team that primarily focuses on aggravate damage, because aggravate damage is electro, this is where Kazuha would be a good fit, and I think is probably the best fit in this team. And this is just your typical aggravate team where Yai go Nahida, double electro with Kuki as your healer, and someone who's able to amplify your electro damage. Because Kazuha can't swirl Dendro, unfortunately we can't buff Nahida's damage. But because the damage should mostly be from Yai, it's not too bad. So similarly with the other team, we also kind of want an offensive support in this last slot. Now because we are not focusing on electro damage but Dendro damage, we unfortunately cannot take advantage of a damage bonus buff that Kazuha can bring. So normally this slot was kind of fulfilled with Yai or Yelan or Xingqiu to kind of shift the damage from pure spread and aggravate to a little bit of hyper bloom. And notice how, because there really isn't a good buffer for specifically Dendro DPS, we kind of have to rely on just pure sub DPS, Yelan probably being the most similar to offensive support because of her talent buff. But now with the release of Furina, guess what? She perfectly fulfills both the sub DPS role that originally was fulfilled with Yai, Xingqiu, and Yelan, but she also has a way superior damage bonus buff that acts similarly to Kazuha. If we look here, Kazuha kind of buffed Yai's damage and as well as a little bit of Kuki's because of the electro damage bonus. While on this team, Furina is able to give damage bonus to Alhaitham and Nahida, which do a lot of damage to this team. So we can kind of see the strength here at play where these are very similar team structures, and she kind of fulfills the same slot, the fourth slot, as Kazuha, which is definitely a great comparison to have. If you are able to match with Kazuha's role in this team, you are a good character. And just one more team comparison to visualize this is the classic international team. Kazuha is able to double swirl and buff both Tartaglia and Shangli's damage with his damage bonus buff. Guess who can also give a damage bonus buff to multiple carries? Look, Furina can with both Alhaitham and Nahida, along with doing a lot of damage herself. So she consolidates both the sub DPS and buffing role, and her buff is really strong. But remember, she has the flaw of consuming HP, so you need to run a healer to offset that HP consumption and also to just help gain those fanfare stacks. And I think what surprised me the most is that her buff is so strong along with her sub DPS capabilities that it actually emphasized healing in Genshin Impact that I've never seen after playing this game since its launch, since after like 3 years. Because before, healers and shielders as defensive units were definitely important in my opinion, just to have a comfortable run, because you don't want to just one-shot everything and not have that back pocket emergency heal to clear your abyss. But with Furina teams, it is actually not only necessary but like a damage boost to actually just full build healing, because before you just need a little bit of healing. You don't really need to focus on healing bonus and all that stuff where you can just shift that on maybe like more energy recharge or EM just to bring out more damage. But healers with Furina want to focus on building healing bonus because that will actually give you more damage. And I really like this because it just brings new build variety to the game. Like for the first time, I'm actually trying to maximize healing on characters like Jean, Baiju, and Bennett. Speaking of those characters, Furina single-handedly brought out a lot of healers into the meta because they are able to help maximize her own buff. Healers like Jean that I mentioned weren't really used a lot, and now she's quite strong because she's able to consolidate as an animal healer with the ability to use Viridescent Venerer. Baiju, I would say, was okay in his release, but with Furina is able to really activate Dendro comps that can utilize Furina with his healing. Charlotte is even nice as a cryo healer if you want to use Furina in a freeze team, and even Mika of all units is able to utilize Furina really well. And even existing characters like Kuki and Bennett that originally a lot of people said that they probably won't be the best with Furina because they only heal one target and their healing is not so great. In reality, they're perfectly fine with Furina. And they even have new builds if you just focus, for example, on just healing bonus Bennett. So I think it's just great to see this new emphasis on healing and more healing characters needed with Furina's release. And lastly, because of Furina's element and her role, she is a very flexible character that could practically be put with any character on any team. And I think the biggest meta changing thing that she brings is the fact that she kind of created her own team archetype that can actually be a character's most powerful, if not competitive team compared to other teams that a character has. And I think the best example of this is Noelle. She was literally brought out of the depths of the Genshin bench into the Genshin meta solely because of both Furina and the Marachuse Hunter set. Just that artifact set on a main character combined with Furina literally just makes an archetype. It's a Furina team. And pretty much any carry can use this Furina team archetype. Like I said, Noelle, Alhaitham can use this set with Furina. I wouldn't be surprised if Razor can be put on this team. And if you let Risley, most characters can use this 4 set with Furina, and it's a good team. It could be their best team. Now remember, you have to provide healing, but you should run a healer anyway, so you should be okay. So because this new Furina team archetype is so strong and can be used by any carry, it will change our future evaluation of new units. Because when we evaluate teams for a new unit, a Furina team could be their best team. For instance, Theory Crafting Navia. I don't think it's a stretch to say Furina could be one of her best teams. So yeah, I think it's pretty crazy to think that just a single character's release can kind of change so much, both in the present and in the future of Genshin. She changed the meta by creating her own meta, and that's the Furina meta. And I think the last time that the Genshin meta was changed, and when we talk about meta, I'm thinking about like team building, unit strength evaluation. I think the last time that was really changed was the release of a new element, Dendro. That was the big change that needed to happen just to shift our mindset. And Furina kind of does that same thing, but it's just a single character release. But if I were to pick a single previous character that also had a big impact on unit evaluation and team building, I think it would probably have to be Kazuha. With his damage bonus buff, he not only boosted the elemental reaction teams that we had, but also set the way for more mono element teams. And his release was all the way back right before Inazuma, and we're like 2 regions later, and we have a character that has even more impact. So I'm glad Furina is here. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say about Furina. Unfortunately, her banner disappeared a few days ago, so if you weren't able to get her, I highly recommend getting her. As a free-to-play player that has to be conservative with his primos, I think I can safely say that because of Furina's strength and meta-changing capabilities and just flexibility, she is definitely one of the top tier 5-star limited pools in this game. And any account that wants to have strong characters should have this character. Hope you enjoyed my more in-depth analysis on Furina. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Hope you have a good day.